to pounce on you all at 4:15.
Oh, the music does that for you, bro? Well, I feel delighted.
It does, it does.
Well, we have some special guests on the program today. Garvin Heerah at 5. And let me make it clear that he has to leave at 5:45, all right? And
Yes, Melissa made it quite clear. So I'm Okura with
the
with how our
instruction.
presentation ought to go and how we ought to manage his time.
Good, good, good. And then later on at 6, we have Dr. Roger Hussain, economist. So that's in store for today's edition of the Afterwork Line. I'm standing by for Richard, but as co-host, you can surely get on with what you have planned for today.
Yeah, I was looking at the Triad Express. Well, actually, it was in Newsday. Page 17 of Tuesdays was in the we saw where Jolene John was saying that violent language contributes to a violent society. And as I perused the editorial,
Yeah.
um, all guns were trailed at our prime minister. If I were to quote here, she's saying that take down the temperature, PM, the violent rhetoric, little boys and big men are listening. Words matter. And the PM has the largest bully pulpit in the nation. I am a fan of Dr. Rowley, I must say.
Yeah.
Um, I like strong leaders and I like people who take stance and positions and they hold to their positions.
Okay.
Um, I don't like to see leaders who, they try to answer to the political current and they try to play on people's emotions and sway depending on where the wind blows.
Okay.
So what I admire about Dr. Rowley through the years is his consistency. Some of his approaches in terms of the things he says, if taken at face value, could really cut deep. But I try to look at the totality of someone's performance. But I'm not here to promote Dr. Rowley. This is not what we're about.
Good.
Um, I like reflecting sometimes, David. You will be slightly older than me, so you would have more of a recollection of his predecessor, Dr. Williams, than I have.
Yeah.
So I'm limited to reading about Dr. Williams for the most part. I was in primary school when Dr. Williams passed.
Oh, okay.
Um, so I have a visual of Dr. Williams in my head. Like sometimes you have a visual image of your grandmother, your grandfather, because you saw them in their later life rather than experience them in their prime.
Yes, I
But
agree with
that
that.
is what grandparents are for. They share their wealth of experience, and God sets it up in such a way that you meet them at a point when they're ready to impart what they know
Yes,
and share their life experience.
that's right.
And
Correct.
your parents' function now is to interpret what your grandparents did in a context that could bring meaning into your life.
Yeah.
But I want to say this. I'm a fan of local books and local literature. I was looking at Owen Batiste when he had passed. I read some of his history in terms of the writings he did and the contribution he made to the print media. So, like everything else, I translate that into buying the books and reading the material just to see what I could learn about Trinidad in terms of before me.
Yes.
If you were to permit me, uh, I'm 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 establishing a parallel here. I'm looking at an article that Owen Batiste wrote in the book The Essential and Other Writings by Owen Batiste. It was released within the COVID period when he passed. And if I were to read a small extract, um, the article was entitled Brothers and Sisters, Long Live the King. It was dated the 1st of October 1972. So let's put this into context. The same way that we look at editorials in the newspaper and read what various editors have to say on a weekly basis. Batiste's column was dated the 1st of October 1972. So when we look at that, 1972 would have been just around 16 years after the People's National Movement would have assumed ascendancy in our national politics.
Yeah.
So somehow I gather with Batiste, he wasn't too much of a, I don't want to say a fan of Dr. Williams, but he wasn't too sympathetic to the PNM cause by 1972. And he was writing, and I'm quoting here, I too want to love and hold and call Dr. Williams my own. But nowadays, my distrust of the Prime Minister goes deep. All his basic instincts seems so primordially selfish and egoistic. To me, in fact, he represents a threat to all that is sincere, charitable, and free. He went on to say, and he was establishing that we were celebrating in 1972 um, just around 10 years of independence, because we became an independent nation in 1962. So basically, in this article, he was assessing where we had grown in that 10-year period. And he was saying that Dr. Williams had developed a certain amount of arrogance and ego in that 10-year period, that he really looked at the people of Trinidad and Tobago in his view, meaning Owen Batiste's view, with a certain amount of contempt. And he was saying that because of the language used by Dr. Williams in relation to particular issues that had arisen around that time. I'm quoting again. He was saying, it is the kind of condemnation, the cruel invective and denunciation, which as spineless followers of God, or of the God we raised on September 24th, 1956, we deserve. So I guess he was referring to the fact that Dr. Williams was elevated into political office as the premier of this country in 56.
Yeah.
And he was saying that in doing so, what Trinidad and Tobago did is created an individual and created the individual that he was. He went on to say, the fact is we have slipped so far back on our knees in front of Williams, cowering and cowardly before his dark gaze, that it does not surprise me anymore when he chooses to ground our faces in the dust. He went on to say, I'm aware, of course, that merely considering this inclination is to want to overthrow the king, and therefore it is heresy. It is heresy. But I have always felt that I must risk heaven's wrath in denouncing myself as often as I can, the fear and the stupidity which makes us anybody's victims. I think what Batiste seemed to be talking about is that we were elevating our leader to such a level that anything he says, that we are cowering towards it. And sometimes I've tried to parallel that into whether we see our current leadership, and I'm not saying Dr. Rowley, but I'm saying the politicians on the whole, because when Geraldine John speaks of we live in a violent society, she's endorsing what Dr. Rowley had said a few weeks ago, that the society has become violent. And she's saying that some of the violence our leaders and our parliamentarians need to examine themselves. And she seems to be paralleling that when parliamentarians and politicians, and I guess she was zeroing in on Dr. Rowley here, speak in a certain tone, that young boys and young children are looking, and the children mimic that sort of behavior. Now, that is a theory. I'm not saying that there's any empirical data to support what Geraldine John is saying. Of course, there's a certain political rhetoric that comes sometimes when politicians criticize each other.
Yep.
But in examining what John is saying, and trying to marry the violence in our society to the way politicians conduct themselves, I am saying and I'm seeing that when we look at what Owen Batiste is writing about Williams in 1972, our politicians have always been strong figures. They've always been people who, and I'm saying our meaning Trinidad and Tobago, we've always had political leaders who have stood by certain principles, and they haven't adapted to change and adapted to some of the people around them. I am not sure that is something to be critical of, but I'm saying also that there could be some merit in it if it is people believe that their leaders aren't sympathetic or aren't empathetic to what's happening. When I look at, and I'm deviating a bit, right? I don't want to seem like I'm living in 1972. I'm trying to establish a parallel and a nexus, bridging what's happening moving forward. When I look at the Express article, the 13th of May 2022, the International Women's Resource Network, its president, Adriana Sandrine Ratan, she was making some parallels. She indicated that we in Trinidad and Tobago have been coping with a lot of violence between 2019 and now. In case the public hasn't been checking, between 2019 to current time, meaning May 2022, we've had 25 women murdered in this country. Now, if you were to put that in the context of the years 2019, calendar years, you may think, well, 2019 to 2022, looking at a 4-year period. But 25 women to die means 25 families without a mother, 25, at least 25 families or with children, mostly, who may not have a parent present. So when we look at the society, every murder that takes place is a murder that impacts upon the lives of our people. And this impact carries a social implication.
Yes, it does.
Um, I was flipping through the newsprint again, and I was looking at the Tobago situation. Um, Farley was talking, and forgive me for referring to him as by his Christian name. I think he's so much part of the fabric of our society now that we all feel we know him well.
Yeah.
Uh, he was talking, and he was saying that there was a murder in Scarborough, where the local dancehall artist Nclosi Bavel, he was murdered and shot in Dutchport restaurant and bar in Scarborough days ago. And Junior Benjamin, the superintendent of police there, and ACP nurse, they came out and they said they were meeting with the security forces, the security companies in Tobago, and they're trying to approach this crime in Tobago in a holistic way. Farley Davidson was even saying that his position was that Tobago shouldn't become desensitized to criminality on such a level that, when you hear about criminality and hear about murders, that it's just another one. Between the first 120 days of this year, we've already had 200 murders in this country.
Tell you.
So it's sad. It really is sad that the violence is not just a replication of what has happened in the past few years, but we've become so accustomed in Trinidad and Tobago to hearing about crime and criminality that it's just another statistic on our table when the day comes.
Yeah.
I measure this in terms of when we look at the violence towards women and children. I was examining an article again in the Newsday, the 8th of May of this year, of course, days ago, article by Jada Latu. It was saying that in 2017, there were 531 reported cases of rape, incest, sexual assaults, according to police figures. So this is not, figures that are being pulled out of a hat. Just imagine, apart from 25 murders involving women between 2019 to now, in 2017 alone, there were 531 reported cases of incest and rape.
I tell you.
The level of incest and sexual assault and sex crimes involving sexual experiences, that figure between 2017 and now hasn't declined. It continues to rise. What this article was basically highlighting is there was a victim of a rape in 2017, a young lady, and she was more or less adding to the editorial that though her accused, the person who raped her from the community, was arrested, he immediately got bail. The matter continued to be adjourned over a period of time. And she appeared in court a period of, a number of 24 occasions. She said, in all fairness to her, the police complainant in the matter appeared on 22 of the 24 occasions. And between 2017 and now, which is 2022, she still hasn't gotten the benefit of the matter starting before the court. This invites the dialogue that, the criminal justice system is on its knees. Dr. Rowley came out and he spoke and he said that he spent millions of dollars. Or when I say he has spent, we understand what that means. The people of Trinidad and Tobago, through their tax-paying money, have been investing in crime, or government has been ensuring that all that has been done and is being done. And then when I say crime in the criminal justice system, so we now have a sexual offences court, or a court that will be treating with sexual offences singularly. So hopefully they saw the statistics, because Attorney Lee Merry, the director of the High Tide Project, he had brought a suit against the judiciary and the director of public prosecution's office, asking them what are the statistics involved in terms of people being charged, matters being brought before the court in relation to murders, and to produce data as it relates to sexual offences. And to this date, none of that data has been provided. So I see Richard is joining us.
Yes, he just
So
joined us there. Richard, good
yeah,
afternoon.
how are you doing,
Yeah,
Richard? All is well?
good. Yeah, for the time being, I was monitoring an operation there. They were wrecking one of my cars. When I say wrecking, not like police work or the wreckers who do that. I had to carry one of my cars to service, but out of the blues, it has no energy, no life.
No
So
problem.
I had to end up calling a wrecker just now, and I was supervising that operation to make sure they took care of it.
Right.
So now that that is out of the way, I'm headed back to where I could go to my laptop
Right.
so that
Right,
I
right.
could participate more meaningfully. So I would listen to Faris some more. I know we have two guests coming on later
Mm-hmm.
from 5
Mhm.
to 5:45, and then from 6 to 7.
Yes.
Yeah, so we take care of that, no problem. So
Okay.
I would listen to Faris some more.
All right. Good. Farid.
Right.
Yeah,
So David, where we are, and Richard,
Yeah.
is
yeah.
when I look at the statistics involved, um, we're looking at this whole issue of a violent society. Um, I think that the government has invested a lot of resources in ensuring that things work in a particular way.
I
We
mean, what?
can't deny we can't deny that the judiciary has gotten the mandate to turn the wheels of the criminal justice system in a way that is significant or suits its interests. And we can identify that by saying a lot of the traffic offenses are now being dealt with outside of the regular magisterial courts. Um, so much of court time was dedicated to dealing with things like tickets on a day-to-day basis. So traffic court is not what it was before.
Right.
That has been solved. That means you're freeing up an entire court in every district. That aside, the soon to come elimination of the preliminary inquiry should put so much work in the hands of the masters of the High Court. So we've introduced masters into the High Court now, and they will be doing what we call a sufficiency hearing to vet cases, and then they will send it towards the High Court where juries could deal with the cases. We are now introducing judge alone trials where we don't need to empanel a jury. A judge could singularly treat with matters. So there has been progress between 2017 and now. I'm not here to say that we've had no progress. The thing is, it will take some time before we have meaningful progress in terms of empirical data reflecting that matters have been treated with, persons have been brought to justice. So a lot of the institutional machinery is in place. In the meantime, however, um, people are still suffering. I don't want to say, and forgive me for using this expression, I don't want to say that the people who currently are victims of crime must bear a certain amount of collateral damage in the interim until the system begins to work in the way and with the automated speed that we intend. Um, I listened to Superintendent Claire Guy Allen from the Gender-Based Violence Unit. She has been talking about there is no statutory, and maybe the public should understand that too. I could re-emphasize that there is no statutory limitation on persons who are victims of sexual assault, whether it be rape or other forms of sexual assault. There's no limitation on they making a report at the police station and having the police investigate. She is making that comment, Claire Guy Allen, to say that victims shouldn't feel intimidated to step forward to make a report on something that may have happened some time ago, months, years ago, because that doesn't preempt the police from investigating something happening or something which happened in the past. Um, So if the public is out there under the mistaken notion that, somebody touched me a year ago, or somebody raped me 2 years ago, that has so much time has passed and you can't make an issue of it anymore, you can. My concern is, in as much as that is the position, so many times you hear about people going to the police station and they don't get that empathetic air or that sympathetic air in the charge room from the officers working the front desk.
Yeah.
You need to have people working that charge room area whose function it is to deal with reports of this nature. I can tell you that because in my work, sometimes I go to the station and you meet restless police officers at the front desk. Um, they're very short and very curt with you.
Yes.
Sometimes they have to finish the dialogue that they're carrying between and among themselves at the station before they turn their eye in your direction to hear what you came for.
Exactly. I
It's
know
not
that.
like customer service oriented.
Hmm.
So in as much as I read these editorials and I feel so enlightened to know that so much is in place, I wonder if sometimes Superintendent Claire Guy Allen ever had the experience of a civilian close to her having to report back to her what they experience, because it's not always smooth at a charge room or in a charge room.
That's right.
But that aside, having said all of that, um, I I have an issue when it is we pick up the newspaper and articles are being carried that but we don't follow up. They don't follow up with the article and tell you what has happened. Um, what is the result of something that would have been initiated sometime before? And let me just create a quick nexus. Um, all this talk and all this rhetoric and editorial and language concerning the foster homes and the children's residences over the years. Um, Suddenly, the guns are being trailed at other politicians for not acting in a certain way in a particular manner. Because the report that came to the wisdom and the knowledge of Ayanna Webster Roy, the content of that report seemed to resonate with previous reports. It just seems to be the same sort of innuendo, the same sort of initiative, the same sort of reoccurrences, just a different year. In other words, in 1997, when we had the Robert Sadger report,
Yeah.
that Sadger report, some 97 to now, it's what, 25 years ago? 25 years ago, spoke of the same sort of physical infrastructural decline of some of these places that house our nation's children, the institutional lack of empathy, lack of amenities to support the children. When we read about this and see about the violence and the abuse that is taking place in these institutions, it's being replicated 25 years after in the report that is currently before us. So when Justice Jones put together the current report, there are parallels we are seeing in the report of 25 years ago under Robert Sadger that are still alive today. It means to say, what about those children who were abused, David, 25 years ago? They are now 25 years plus parents of children. Those same children who were children in 1997, who are adults now, let us say in the mid 40s and the early 40s today.
Yeah.
They are now fathering and training children, and they are imparting values and wisdom and knowledge that they would have acquired through the years. But these people would have been also broken people, broken by the system, broken by society, broken by the community, disappointed by the politicians. They would have grown up seeing and experiencing in Trinidad and Tobago not only the hurt that they endured personally, but the lack of infrastructure and the neglect that they were subject to. Today, they
How
are witnessing
effective,
that.
Faris, how effective those parents who were abused as children, who today have children, how effective they would be in applying that to their children in terms of imparting proper values and so on.
We could look at that from two positions.
Mm-hmm.
If it is you've been hurt by an experience, David and Richard, you've been hurt in your past by a relative, a loved one, sexually, physically, emotionally. If you were left to yourself and your own devices to process and internalize that abuse and to try to work it through your head and your own system using your own psychological makeup. In other words, things just lie fallow untreated. No apology from the relative, no acknowledgement of wrong that was done, no healing taking place. So you grow up with scar tissue of all that you went through the years, and now you're entering a relationship with a woman. You're marrying this person. You're bearing fruit, bringing children into this world. You bruised by all of that you went through. All that scar tissue remains psychologically, emotionally. So it could do two things. It could cause you to be a stronger, better parent because you don't want your child to experience what you experience, and you don't want your child to be subjected to the abuse that you were subjected to. So you protect them from the extended family. You protect them from the godparents, from adults in the community, because you yourself may have been abused by all these other people. That in itself could be damaging because what you're doing is breeding mistrust and telling your children that, you see, adults, they could be very destructive people, and they could be more destructive than they could be constructive. So they take that into the schools. They don't trust the teacher. They take that into the sporting community where you don't respect your coaches. So it may maybe not respect, but you're distrustful. You're mistrustful of them. So you grow up. You have some children growing very, very suspicious of the society. Very, very cynical about the institutions that they interact with on a day-to-day basis. So you're cynical in school. You're cynical about the goodwill of the sporting bodies that you interact with, and your extracurricular things, the scouts, the cadets, the football team, the cricket team in the school, anything to do with the arts, anything that involves people, you have a bother about. I don't think, and this is my concern, you could correct me, this is my view. If it is we didn't engage these hurt people from 1997 to now, and the institutions of the state wasn't working with them, and there wasn't a healing process taking place. This is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with tarnished individuals, hurt individuals, people with problems that was never treated, and now they were left to their own women fancy, and they were left to lie fallow and work their own problems out because we never put institutional machinery in place to deal with those issues. I'm thinking that if it is the infrastructure we have here, this gender violence unit under Guy Allen, and we look at the Rape Crisis Center, we look at the Victim Support Unit, we look at all these little institutions of the state that have been created. If these institutions function and they fulfill their purpose and their mandate, then this generation that have suffered may be in a better position to be healed, to be cured, to at least be able to internalize what they experience in a manner that they could come out of it with positive thinking. But we had to lose a generation or a few generations between 97 and 2022 for us to get to that point.
What about Faris? I want to go back to administering proper parenting to children by parents who were victims, right? Just like in law, you have transferred malice. Couldn't you have a situation where children who have parents that suffered such abuse, that some of that victim feeling that the parents suffered could be transferred onto the children and make them feel, less than equal and that type of thing?
But this is exactly what I'm saying. I don't subscribe to the transferred malice
No, that was
theory
just an example.
on all
Yeah,
boards. But
yeah.
I understand the spirit of what you're saying when you say transferred malice. My position is, before people embark on childbearing and family life, for them to be proper parents and proper husbands and proper spouses, they must deal with their own internal issues, their rage and their conflict, and iron that out before you begin to share your life with the next person. Because what you'll be doing is corrupting another human being with your life experience, subjecting them to all your trauma, and inviting into their personal space all your ill experiences. So it's not just the children, it's the relationships. This is why we have
Yeah.
domestic violence. We have a lot of
But
hurt people, hurting people.
some youngsters hearing that, they can start to feel a sense of inferiority, a complex, you know. Um, that could scar a child, although the child, him or herself, didn't go through it, but knowing that
Yeah.
the parents went through it.
And I'm agreeing
But
with you. I'm saying,
yeah,
I feel what you say there. It's not an easy thing when you come home as a child, you enter an abusive environment. You enter an environment where it's not sympathetic and it's not empathetic to the tribulations and the trials you as a child face in the classroom and you face in the community, and you come home seeking resolution of those issues. Remember, the same way a parent is experiencing life, experiencing inflation and reduced salaries, and experiencing reduced budgets, little lack of cash to purchase food and to provide a comfortable environment for the children. The child may not be experiencing that because the child, in the sense that the child is not the provider. The child is the one who has to be provided for. So when a parent is angry, given the, where we are now in terms of our daily lives, and then you have an angry parent who is not just a victim of circumstances, but is a victim of his own life experience. All of that coming together in a cocktail of experiences in a household, and that is happening and that's bubbling every day. That situation involving that child is not experiencing love or experiencing a comfortable, warm environment where he's encouraged to share his opinions and his views, and where his mind and his heart is being trained as to how to cope with what he has to deal with in that classroom, and the peacock he's getting from his friends, and the stress he's feeling in terms of coping with schoolwork that he himself has fallen behind on for the last, I don't know, I don't want to say 2 years, but for the last whenever. Just imagine living in that pressure cooker every day. So when I read about the violence in the society and the violence in the school, and this is what I'm coming back to, when unhappy people get together, what we have is a lot of unhappiness, and when unhappy people commingle with other unhappy people, we have an unhappy society. All we read about every day when I take up the papers, I like to flip through just to see what the headlines are. All I'm seeing is rape, violence, murder, politicians exchanging harsh words between each other. While all that is going on, we look at the international climate is war, Russia and the Ukraine. Yeah, reading, you're not being exposed to anything positive, You have to search and sift and siphon to find something positive to hold on to. I don't know, the newspaper seems to be the bearer of bad news. That every time you flip something, you flip a page, is you want to see what is the latest pain that presenting itself. I have real concern when I read these things, and I think we need, and this is where David and I started. You need leaders in a society like ours who could guide the way that we approach our issues. and whose motive and mandate is to build the society. Trust me, I'm not saying that that is not the mandate of all leaders. I'm just re-emphasizing that leadership is important in crisis. And when we as citizens need direction, we have to get direction from the people who we put in a position or place in a position to carry us forward, not to console us in the grief that we're in or where we at. Leadership is about taking you from one point to the next, conveying you from one direction, taking you to another point, and getting you to understand that there is more to what is happening in the society and more to what we could achieve than what meets the eye. Um, I'm looking at, and I'm not just talking murder, but I like to look at these statistics because sometimes you say things and people out there say that, oh, you're just talking from the top of your head. If we look at the Sunday newspaper, the 8th of May, I'm just quoting here. Ralph Maraj, he was quoting and saying our murder figure is racing to over 200 in just over 4 months. Between 2010 and now, over 5,200 persons have been cut down, meaning that they've been murdered. In that time period between 2010 and 2022, we've had the murder rate extend beyond 500 twice. Some more statistics. From 2010 to now, averaging 1,500 annually, there were over 22,000 reports of domestic violence. So let's put that in the context, David. Can you imagine between 2010 and 2022, every year, we have 1,500 reports of domestic violence in this country? That is an alarming figure.
It is.
Then we haven't discussed with that the unreported figures, because when you hear 1,500 reports of domestic violence,
Yeah.
how many times have you and I spoken to people in our communities or spoken to people on the road or in commute or that we meet on the streets who tell us about things that are happening in the home? They may not understand that what they are accounting for or what they're reporting or what they're sharing with you amongst what we call domestic violence. They think it's normal to be physically abused and emotionally abused. And these reports aren't made to the police station. In fact, sometimes these little abuses, we tend to want to treat it at home. I'm not saying to go to the police with every little issue that arises. You can deal with some things and mediate and conciliate within the boundaries of your own home. Or your community, or between you and your neighbor, or try to advise the people in your community that they ought to live differently. Those are unreported cases. So when you see 1,500 per year, those are 1,500 that have gotten to the point where it's so unbearable that they end up in the police station.
That's right. The police, on the other hand, too, they sometimes you go there to make reports. I've heard people talking about that too. You go there to make reports, and they just sort of talk you into, give it some time. Don't take it seriously. It can be worked on, and I think sometimes instead of the police having a direct input initially, they tend to just talk the people out of it and send them back into that situation.
I agree with you, but I could say this also. Sometimes the police is a reflection of our community and our society, though they may have some enhanced training.
Yeah.
Sometimes, if it is you assess a situation by way of communication and dialogue, some of the issues that may come before them are issues that they may think could be worked out. The problem the police may not envisage, or what the police may not be envisaging in their mind or confronting, is that they ought to bring in the other party at the station when they want to say, well, go and work it out.
Yes.
Those send the woman home to the man who is presenting himself as the problem and ask her to work it out with him, because it takes two people to work out a problem. So when they turn you away and tell you go on and give it some time, what they should be doing is calling that man on the phone, telling him, you know, we have a report here that we could act in this on this report in a particular way, but we don't think that we may need to do that. If it is, you know, you could come in and have a chat with us.
Yeah.
You could tell us how you feel. What's
Yeah.
your version of the story, and see if it is. If not in that moment, it could be trashed out by the following morning.
Yeah, well, sometimes too, I think instead of calling on the phone, they should take the complainant and go to the home and see if they can
Well,
work things out.
David, that's the ideal thing. Eh? It's the
Yeah.
ideal thing to go to the home. But my issue is the police going and tell you there are no vehicle, and they're going and tell you that they don't have the resources and they don't have the time and they have other things to do. So
And
I only use the
in most cases, Farid, some of these policemen have no kind of training in in pacifying domestic violence. I think when people come to them with that kind of complaint or to make a report of such, I think they find themselves in a position where I'm not trained for this. I can just talk this out and forget that. So I think like the masters in the high court, I think there should be a social welfare officer in the police station or some sort of connect with such a person to engage the people who are up in arms against each other, especially where there's a domestic thing like family related stuff. And I don't want to make it sound domestic as just husband and wife or boyfriend and girlfriend or fiance and that kind of thing. It could be a family related incident that initiated through family disputes, and it end up in situations like that. Now, most of these policemen are not trained for that. So I think somebody in the community or assigned to a police district, to be involved, or you can call this person and get this person to come in immediately. Not like DMOs who have a death on the highway and the body will be there for hours. That wouldn't solve anything. We need somebody with direct and immediate input.
David, I'm seeing Mr. Heerah joining us.
I'm happy that he's on now.
It seemed like he joined us a few minutes earlier, and I'm happy that he's here.
Yes.
I want to make the most of the time that we have, so we will get back to where we are here. We're just sticking a pin in our discussion.
Yes, good.
So we can accommodate Mr. Heerah and make the most of his presence.
Yes, it's important. So, I agree.
I don't know if Mr. Heerah could join us. I'm just slipping out of our screen for a few seconds.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Heerah.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm good. Nice to have you back with us.
Okay, good. Are we live as yet?
Yes, we are live, and we are happy that you joined us before. We are happy that you joined us earlier.
Not a problem.
Yes. Brilliant.
Well, as I said, I had limited time. We have until around 5:35, 5:45. So I agree with Farid. Let's grab at it while we can and utilize time, positively, so we can capture it to the space and the window that is available.
Good. Farid?
Mr. Heerah, it's a pleasure to have you here today. You being a distinguished guest, it's not very often that we get an opportunity to speak on the topic that we're speaking on today. And having somebody with your expertise is important. It adds to the dialogue in the context of putting practical experience to work with the information that we have. Richard is with us. He is in commute now, but he'll be joining us from a different forum soon. But that doesn't hinder him from saying hello now. Richard, you're with us. Mr. Heerah is with us, so we're gonna get into the discussion.
Yes, I'm seeing Mr. Heerah and I'm hearing everything. I was hoping to be by my laptop before Mr. Heerah came on, but I guess we could go ahead like that. I'll be there shortly.
Okay, Richard. Hi. Good
Mr.
evening.
Heerah,
Hello.
So all of our viewers who are streaming live and those that are listening in their evening traffic, good evening, Trinidad and Tobago, and our international listeners.
Mr. Heerah, give us some background to your. I know that you were once the head of the National Operations Center, but give us some more information about yourself now in terms of the work that you're doing currently.
Yeah, sure. Well, my former dispensation is well known in the public domain, both locally and internationally. And as for now, I have continued to stay relevant with my research and with my team. I'm available to a number of organizations and training institutions worldwide as I provide that strategic security input. So I'm a strategic security consultant dealing with organizations and different systems, speaking specific to law enforcement, crime reduction, what is known as safe city operations and homeland security. I do a number of speaking engagements internationally. COVID has put a damper on some of that, but technology has allowed us to springboard that availability still, and advising various what I'll call platforms in the light of confidentiality as we deal with the sensitivity of organizations and national security, but advising various platforms on strategic national security initiatives and how things can be applied in order to deal with law enforcement, intelligence, and of course, national security from a whole. So that's what I do. Outside of that, I'm an organizational transformation expert as I deal with transformation of organizations, strategic planning and implementations, and facilitation of strategic transformation as people deal with change and the challenges of change, and more importantly, the aspect of resistance, but all in the forward desire to achieve organizational efficiency. So those are some of the stuff that I do. Outside of that, I'm family oriented and love spending time with the family. I'm doing a lot of that now, and quality time with the family, because at the end of it all, Fareed, Dave and Mr. Nora, you'd know that when all is done, family comes first. Exactly. And I prioritize my quality time with family.
Let's get into some discussion.
Well, I want to agree with Mr. Heerah. Family does come first. It doesn't matter. So I understand that. Understood fully.
I was reading recently your article in the newsprint, cyber awareness. It starts with you, and you were sharing that in the same way that we protect ourselves by having that sort of physical infrastructure in place to protect us from banditry and crime, that when we're dealing with cyberspace, the mindset ought to be the same. What we may not understand, given the increased use of technology and the dependency that we've been creating among our young people, with all this institutional infrastructure that's now in place where everybody's streaming, everybody's online. We've had a recent example where the Massey stores, they had an issue with cybercrime infiltration into their system, and a number of stores were shut down over a period of time. Cyberspace is becoming important, and protecting ourselves from cyber criminals is an important part of our diet moving forward. What I notice is, and this is where I want to start, what is your view in terms of legislation in this country and that treats with, or that creates the bedrock with which we could approach cybercrime? Are you of the view that we have laws that are supporting or lend support to experts like yourself and disciples of what you do, and people who are trained in this area to act on in dealing with cyber criminality?
Right. So I'm thankful that we have chosen this as our launch pad into the conversation, because to be quite truthful as a professional, I'm quite satisfied with the legislation and the legislative agenda of the administration to introduce law regarding cybersecurity that would treat, by essence, cybercrime and cyber criminals. But it comes right back to a point David was making a while ago concerning that family sort of family support, community policing training, in that there may be systems and structures and units set up, but is there the training, be it law enforcement or any specific unit, to enforce that law, to understand detection, and to be able to manage and navigate the prosecutorial process regarding the law that is supporting the sector or the industry or what we'll call the awareness. And right now, we'll be talking about cyber situation, cyber crime, cyber criminals. So yes, there is law for it, but there seems to be a gap in the proper training, implementation of that training into practice of enforcement, and more importantly, being able to provide the data-supported evidence in the prosecutorial process. So those are some things that needs to be addressed and probably are being addressed, but I must say in all fairness, where I'm sitting, it's difficult to put my finger on the pulse and detect whether or not we are progressing in that area. As a conversation this evening, and I applaud the Media House for raising the conversation, as a conversation this morning, this afternoon, sorry, we need to raise the conversation in such a way so that it is its volume points in the right direction, that guys, we understand that there is law, we understand that there is legislation, we understand that the administration is moving assiduously to ensure that these things are put in place. Well, how do we meet this on the half? Is law enforcement also advancing the agenda with the right training to enforce this law and to manage and navigate the prosecutorial process in the event that there are detections and arrests? How do we capture the evidence? How do we do the data mining on the evidence? And how do we utilize the technology so as to provide evidential support to a prosecutorial process? And that is where I think the conversation needs to be guided. And I'm hoping that in some way that the experts, the decision makers, can make a statement that satisfies the concerns of the citizens that this is being addressed.
All right. When we look at the existing legislation, we have the Strategic Services Agency Act, the Interception of Communications Act. These acts were some 10 years apart in terms of its dispensation into the legislative agenda. We had an amendment recently in 2020 to the Strategic Services Act. We also look at the introduction by the state of spyware. And when I say the introduction, I'm not saying that it never existed before within the last 2 years. I mean, it's clear from the information we received that previous administrations were accused as way back as 2009 of spying into the personal space of not just politicians, but journalists. These were the things that were in the public space. Politicians, journalists, everyone was being spied upon. In terms of spyware and in terms of the legislation that is in place that allows for the state to monitor the citizens of this country, do you think in terms of cyber awareness, there are other pieces of law that ought to be introduced to protect citizens from the thrust of the existing legislation?
Okay, so as you would be fully appreciated of, there would be certain limitations and parameters that I can push forward on answering this question or speaking on the topic. And that is in two aspects. One, because of my previous dispensations and my non-disclosures, that's one. And two, it is always, as a professional, to remain behind the line, to toe the line, as we say in common language, and not to speak on really sensitive national security issues in the public domain. But I would like to speak specific as to how you have couched the inquiry. And that is, yes, there is an SSA legislation that was revised in 2020. They have, and then there's also the Intercept and Communications Act. And on top of that, we're dealing with the Cybersecurity Act. But there are two different things in that the SSA Act speaks specific to what was known as the strategic administrative protocols and processes of an organization and its integration or amalgamation of other units that the government saw it fit to bring under one cloth, to put, for instance, into one system, under one platform, under the SSA. So a number of other units were brought in under that, and therefore the act was adjusted to accommodate that amalgamation. So that's how it is organizationally. The Intercept and Communication Act speaks towards a tool of our intelligence architecture, and you're quite correct, for the utilization by the state for the gathering of intelligence specific to certain targets within the criminal fraternity, if I'm to call it that, or within the criminal underworld, or people who have been targeted based on investigations and intelligence gathering. So what we have seen from an international perspective is that there have continued to be numerous increases in upgrades and advances of the utilization of technology, be it in cyberspace or along the lines of intercept communication. We have gone ahead to, sensationalize it into the, along the lines of spyware, and got everybody kind of concerned. All the eyebrows went up. People were asking a whole set of questions. A lot of armchair experts were speaking. But it is very, very important to understand that once there is a functional intelligence model within a country, the utilization of technology and the utilization of intercept communications is necessary so as to meet the demands of the increased momentum that will take place in the environment, the incremental changes within the criminal atmosphere, and to stay ahead of the game. That is your key objective. That is your aim. So all intelligence agencies have in fact moved to advance their agenda by upgrading their technology, utilizing intercept and communications. But one has to understand that there has to be also a clearly defined need and a why we are going this way, and also a communication towards the average citizen that it is not that we are monitoring everybody. It is not that you, the man on the street, the housewife, the taxi driver, your phones are being monitored, your systems are being monitored. I think that is where it went out of hand regarding information management. And it is very needed now that somebody in authority or somebody speaks specific to that so that we can calm the nerves of citizen Trinidad and Tobago, and people don't believe that I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that because I'm not too sure who's listening. That is where it pivots, because right now as it speaks, and we've heard it from a number of different platforms, people have said things, some of them, I believe, a little reckless, to be quite truthful, but they have said a number of things outside there that has put or compromised the integrity of our intelligence architecture in country. And in order to sanitize that, for want of a better term, or to rectify and bring that into some sort of normality, somebody needs to stand up and speak and to identify and to authenticate that this is not so, and to satisfy more so to calm the nerves of our citizens.
So from what you're saying, you have the view that the general state of alarm that people, the general public feels, it's accentuated by the lack of information that is being provided to citizens on the whole.
Correct.
If it is people who, if the education in terms of the literature and the information is put out there and packaged in a proper fashion, then people should not be feeling as if, everything that they do, the average citizen, the man on the street, the maxi taxi driver, the regular people who work for their living every day, they shouldn't feel that their lives are being peered upon and peeped upon by randomly and arbitrarily.
Yeah, it's education in the line of public awareness, because sometimes people take the term education myopically and believe that somebody needs to go to some sort of training to understand. When Farid spoke about education the other day in that interview, so that we could go to some sort of training or exposure or some sort of workshop and understand. No, it's not that. It's public awareness, and that public awareness comes as part of your crisis management and crisis communication plan. As a national security ministry, also law enforcement agencies and support agencies, you need to have crisis communications plan turning all the time to be able to treat with the issues and address them. It is not being reactive, it is being proactive. But then what happens is that you build a certain amount of trust within the citizenry that, okay, we're going to listen to hear what you're saying here, because what has happened, and I say this without any reservation, a lot of people pulled on the topic, identified it, animated it up a little bit under spyware, created this Netflix series, and now it's being used as a political football all over the place, from one end of the spectrum to the other. And that compromises the integrity of your efficacy as an intelligence agency in Trinidad and as an intelligence gathering system or architecture within national security. I think there is still room and there still is time to rectify this and bring it back to some sort of order so that Trinidad can at least be contained, and Trinidad and Tobago, that is, and recognize for a fact, okay, I heard a lot of this have been erroneous. There might have been some fake information outside there. Let us settle down here now for the good of country. I think a certain amount of patriotism now has to work its way through the DNA of both ends of the spectrum, whether you're sitting in the opposition side or the ruling administration, because we are talking about the safety and security of a country. We're not talking about political mileage.
When I examine the Interception of Communications Act, I'm with you at what you're saying. I'm right there. I follow what you're saying, that we need to, as a country and from a political point of view, both the opposition and the government need to be more communicative and a little more patriotic in terms of what is the agenda, rather than be critical of each other in open space. Because when the mudslinging takes place between them, it spills into the print media, it spills into the social media, and then the public now is interpreting that in the wrong way.
Yeah, mud
I get
splatters.
that.
Mud slings and mud splatters. So I concur.
Yeah. When I examine, and I'm saying this particularly because from a legal point of view, when we examine the legislation, with the Interception of Communications Act, the provisions of the legislation specifically says that when there is information out there that particular persons or particular institutions need to be monitored, or they are being monitored, and there is information now that an investigative team may need to be involved in to act on what they become aware of. Let me be real. The legislation under the Interceptions of Communications Act allows for 3 persons to be approached in order to get a warrant to retrieve information from, let us say, one of the networks. So we are looking at the Commissioner of Police could be approached by an investigative team of police officers who think that they have information and they're trying to get through from cyberspace, or trying to intercept from some sort of database or through data mining information that could lead to the arrest or the investigation of certain things. So the officers can go to the Commissioner of Police or approach his office. The Chief of Defense Force, he has that power now where his officers could approach him. We also have the SSA director could be approached, and warrants could be sought, and you have to justify based on your intelligence whether or why a warrant should be granted in order to retrieve information. So there's a vetting process. You can't just randomly go into people's information or investigate someone. There has to be a basis in law. So that vetting process exists under the Interception of Communications Act. When we examine the literature and the provisions of the law, it is clear. My concern, and I'm not asking you to say anything that you cannot say. I'm not trying to entrap you here in any way. My concern is, when I look at the Strategic Services Agency Act, that vetting process doesn't exist. There is no such thing as I can go now to get permission from someone and be able to reasonably justify why it is we're trying to retrieve this information, or why it is we want to monitor certain persons or certain institutions. The vetting process that exists under the Interception of Communications Act doesn't parallel or manifest itself in the SSA legislation. So this is my intrusion into the dialogue when I say, and I'm saying it purely from the point of view of a lawyer looking and reading the legislation and reading the print media and trying to interpret the facts and the data that is being presented to us, because I'm just a member of the public. I'm not working in the SSA or working behind the scenes to know what the intelligence is. The citizens out there, they feel fearful, not just because the dialogue is not and the information is not forthcoming, but they feel fearful because when they examine the legislation and when they read about what is the checks and balances that are in place to protect them, we're not seeing it in the SSA legislation. In fact, the director of the SSA gets his direction from the Minister of National Security. So when we have a politician directing a public servant or directing an institution as to how things ought to be conducted, that gives rise to a certain amount of suspiciousness and ambivalence. Having said that, do you think that amendments could be made to the legislation, or amendments should be made to the SSA legislation that allows for more accountability in the same way that it allows under the Interception of Communications Act? Or you are of the view that for the sake of national security, the status quo as it exists should remain the same?
Yeah, I mean, that was a very detailed preamble towards the actual point being made of whether or not there is room for amendment so that there can be more muscle, be it in the act or in the operationalization of the system at the SSA. And I would think that there's, as a professional, as a strategic security expert, there's always flexibility within certain laws, legislations, company acts, you name it, so as to give that sort of operationalization because the environment changes in us incrementally, and we have to make incremental changes, and there's always that flexibility to do that. What I would suggest, however, is that there be a meticulous approach to review, just as you've articulated, maybe a steering committee or some sort of specialized team that can drill into this and to detect some of those flaws, as you would have said, of which I am not going to concur, to agree or disagree. But if you are, based on your legal standing, Mr. Ali, of which I have a great respect for, have recognized and detected certain flags, then I think there needs to be a drive for some sort of voice, to be able to say this and to present this, and in the recognition of where we believe that there may be some flaws or weaknesses, so that we can rectify this. We meaning as a country, because if there's an existence here and you've picked up some weaknesses in the system, then it needs to be fixed. Just as you rightfully said, there needs to be some parallelism so that we can run in accordance of both of the governing acts and laws. So in light of what I'll call progressive thinking for planning regarding development, and more so professionalizing how we do business, I would agree that if there are detections and weaknesses, there should be some sort of system that provides the airing, the voicing, the recommendations of what you have just said, so that it can be addressed holistically. So that's my take on it. I can't go into the details, and I would not dare step into that boundary. As I said, there would be parameters on how we would speak this afternoon. So that's my response to your point. And
I appreciate that completely. I know that given your experience, there are things, there are angles that you can't touch on. I'm not going to put you in that position at all.
Thank you very much.
When we look at the Data Protection Act, there is details within the Data Protection Act that allows for personal data, personal information, and meaning that if you're working in the public service, naturally there will be information and data as it relates to your function and the things that you do. And when I say you, I'm using you in the
general
sense of a used pronoun. But the Data Protection Act in itself allows where your details aren't or should not be used in any peculiar way, or unless there's a justifiable grounds. Cyber awareness is an issue that will forever be part of our existence moving forward. I know that there was a cyber protection, cyber awareness issues that was being piloted in a cyber bill at one point in time. Do you have any suggestions that, in terms of areas of the law or provisions that in your experience ought to be addressed in that bill, in that legislation, or that proposed legislation, that you think that your review would assist?
Yeah. Well, thanks again for this question. I would not probably touch on the fact of the law and amending the law, but I will think along the lines of what we like to say in country, that whole of government interministerial approach. But I have been speaking in a series of forums, and I would go back to that, in that we have to take a whole of government interministerial, interstate sort of approach. Whether the law addresses it or not, it will come back to the gap of whether there's enforcement and training and know-how, and how we can utilize the law for the betterment, or for the development, or for more so the continued business continuity, I should say, of the whole system of cyber awareness. But what is necessary is that we have to start recognizing be it cyber awareness, communication and deception, gang warfare, homicides, small arms and light weapons, SALW, whatever, human trafficking. We have seen over the years where there has been a pullback and a push forward that is a national security thing. That is a Minister Hines thing. That is a SSA thing, or a police or defense force thing. And we have continued to run the fact that, okay, I am youth and culture here. I am energy, tourism, you know, the various ministries, health. We have our headaches here with COVID and the elephant in the room and all that stuff. And people have continued along the lines of their ministerial roles and functions without recognizing that crime and national security is everybody's business. Yes, there is a ministry and a minister and support systems to treat with that. I'm saying all of that to say that every single ministry and state agency in country should be strategizing as we go forward. And it's a nice time around now with this whole midterm and you know, that type of stuff. If we put it into a timeline, now is a good time. Now is a good time to reset, to recognize what am I doing as a ministry to contribute towards crime reduction, be it cyber awareness or all of the other issues that jump up. Why am I going that way? Because in every single ministry, be it public utility, that's a big one, Ministry of Works and Transport, there is the exchange of data. There is the exchange of information, and therefore we should be considering a systems integration approach throughout our ministries and state agency, where access to information on individuals who will be considered persons of interest, or they may be fitted into the pipeline of an investigative process, will be accessible without the delays of bureaucracy, in the essence of national security. So you may be a ministry this afternoon, you may be an agency in a ministry this afternoon, but you in your strategic planning, in your implementation, should be considering what are some initiatives that can be implemented for crime reduction, that can support the national policy of national security, so that we can have a holistic whole of government, integrated interministerial data sharing, data information management, access, but more importantly, a sort of control effort for data management along the lines of investigations, especially with persons of interest, making it easier to access information to treat with the investigative process, especially if we intend to do things like monitoring and managing and you know, that whole measurement of effectiveness across the line of government operations. That's my take on how I would approach the issue.
Richard, I see you've changed your forum. You arrived at your base. Let me introduce you into the dialogue now, Richard. I know you would have some questions to Mr. Heerah.
Okay, so Mr. Heerah, I know when you were in the under the Ministry of National Security, under working with then Minister, I believe it was Captain Gary Griffith, you all had created the national
Operations Center, the National Operations
National Operating Center, yes. And that was intended to push back crime, and it seemed to have worked, and then it was partly from our information dismantled and so on. But it seemed to have had an effect back then on crime. It did push the numbers back to some extent. Yes. So one could argue that it was working, at least its existence seemed to have contributed in a positive way to the pushback on crime. You would know more about that. You may have the data, but that is what was shared in the media. Not that they said it was due to that National Operating Center, but that those of us who were paying attention, we attributed part of the reason for the pushback as the bringing together of all those systems into one. So we discussed it a number of times, and we felt it was a good strategic move to bring all those things so everybody will know what is happening in real time. That worked. Now today we heard about Pegasus, and given your professional background and so on, you may not be able to, as you said earlier on, to go into it to such an extent that you may compromise your professional reputation and whatever oath you may have taken as such a professional. So I get that. But we have something that was acquired for $1.6 billion. And that was not acquired 1 or 2 months ago. That was several months ago. You may know exactly when it was done in terms of what time, if it was last year, what time last year. But I'm raising all of that to say this. From then to now, we should have been able to measure the effect of that in terms of impact it would have had on crime, just as we did with the National Operating Center. We haven't seen that. On the contrary, the money has been spent, but crime has increased. It has increased astronomically. How we react to that? What could be the cause?
Yeah, it's a tremendous analysis. I don't expect anything less, Richard, because I mean we have had very good conversations in the past, and I know you're coming from a research and information-driven approach, and you're quite correct. So analytically, if you are to look at the empirical evidence, it seems as though, wait a minute, we had something that was working. We would have acquired additional resources, spent X amount of money. We would have somewhere along the lines expected some sort of results-driven, what I'll call readouts or results-driven products as to how this thing has been used, especially these with crime reduction, and we're not seeing that, and therefore it must be questioned. You see, acquisition of resources is not only strategy. Acquisition of resources is not only supportive towards an aim or an objective or an initiative. Acquisition of resources must be tied in to an operational strategy that is rolled out with expected timelines and achievements or objectives over that period that must be measurable. And you're quite correct. So bringing in a sort of corporate understanding to the whole administrative process or the running of the business, one would expect if certain amount of money is spent, then we're expecting a certain type of result. If we're not seeing that, then somebody needs to be held accountable. That is why I would have said, I just spoke recently in another forum internationally, and I was advising decision makers, just as we have in this country, but at an international level, along the lines of adopting a project governance approach to national security or to your national security. And what I was leading to was the fact that people think that we need to be in the corridors of public servantism. We need to be in the corridors of thinking along the lines of a ministry over the years. This is how it was. But hey, there comes a time when you have to shift the narrative. There comes a time when you have to hold people accountable. So project governance would mean that if I am giving you X amount of money, and these are your projects or your objectives that you need this amount of money or resources for, then I'm going to hold you accountable over a period of time to ensure that there are deliverables. If there aren't deliverables, it comes to the most important part of that arrangement. People are going to be held accountable for not achieving their goals. That's the project governance approach. And therefore, we have come in time now to see that approach being applied at our ministries, and it's not only national security that is under the light here, maybe all of our ministries where we are spending a lot of money for resources in order to up our game, then show us by measurement of effectiveness that the game has been up, that we have achieved. If we have not achieved, then you have answerable, or your heads will roll, as we would like to say. And we're not seeing that. So I agree with you. If money has been spent, resources have been acquired, and there was an expected result that is not being met, or as you would have used a tremendous word that I'll adopt, astronomically, we've seen a reduction in crime, murders, homicides, a place like it just gone crazy, then somebody needs to answer and answer quickly, because accountability is not only at the operational level, it also goes to the apex of the triangle. And therefore we need to hear and see answers, because that money was spent by the employees. We are the employers of the state.
And just like businessmen, when they engage in capital outlay to any investment, they look at ROI, return on investment.
Precisely.
And if the return isn't meaningful, they want to know who encouraged them to make such an investment, who they followed. And depending on how costly it is, if it isn't anywhere close to where their expectation may have been at the time when they took the decision, someone head would roll. Because while CEOs and others may get something wrong and survive, when they get something wrong, that's hugely costly. Some pay a price. 1.6 billion, a lot of money, enough time is gone to measure how effective this thing would have been to justify the expenditure.
Precisely.
To me, I would say, go on, Mr. Heerah.
Sorry, I said precisely because if it is not effected or enforced, just as we were talking about with the first point that Richard was talking about with the whole family thing and the training and all, if there is no enforcement to the discussion that we're having this evening, what we're going to have is a repeat and becomes monotonous. And as we know in law, we'll be sitting on the panel here, a practice over a period unmolested becomes law. It becomes a norm. It becomes a way we do business.
A norm.
It gets embedded in our culture.
Yeah. Yeah. It becomes part of the course of dealings in the society, a normal
Correct.
thing. How do we go forward from here? From your experience, clearly it appears as though, I don't want to say someone dropped the ball. I know you can't say that, but I would think that has to be investigated now, because after all that money has been spent, and it has been spent for about 6 months, and we have not seen the type of returns we wanted, some type of action ought to be taken. The citizens of Trinidad and Tobago would know, listen, something went wrong, and they are seeking to rectify this. How do we go forward from here, Mr. Heerah? How could we engage in rectification?
I would take the...
As it relates to the pushing.
I take the approach on that from a strategic oversight. And I was just having the conversation with Farid before you came on screen, that there comes a time in the lifeline of your organization, your ministry, your governance, that calls for review. And therefore, at this time, there should be some sort of meticulous review in how we are doing our business, measuring not by public relations and mileage, but measuring the effectiveness of what we do. And therefore, part of what we have just discussed should be part of the National Security Review. And the results need to also be communicated to the citizenry. And where there are failings, just as Farid said and articulated quite correctly, along the lines of detecting certain issues and weak points in legislation, that is also part of a review. Where these things are detected, where our weaknesses are detected, we need to speak specific to our citizenry that these are some of our implementation methodologies that will be approached now to fix this, while we still have some time. Not understand that there's a fire burning there, but nobody will get burned, man. There's just some smoke. You know, we have this sort of complacency. I held back to use that word for the entire afternoon, but it has to come out, guys. There is a complacency on how we do business. And there's also a sort of, you can't question me on how we do business. And therefore, we need to break those walls and build bridges so that we can appear more approachable, we can appear more open and transparent, and we can appear as we have the interest of our country. That's why we use the term patriotic in our thought process very early in the conversation. How open are we to informing the public, informing the citizens, informing Trinidad and Tobago that, you know what, we have made some errors here and we are looking to fix this, because according to the review, according to this assessment, we have dropped the ball. It is not working. Prior to the acquisition of resources, be it the National Security, Public Utilities, Ministry of Energy, you name it, there must be a due diligence process that answers the questions, tests and adjusts the suitability and the adaptability of all of the resources, regardless how many zeros we are going to spend. And I'm not too sure if we are exercising the due diligence to the level that it is required, or it has just become a normal part of the process. Okay, we'll sign off on the due diligence, but are we really exercising the due diligence? Pilot projects, before we close, guys, pilot projects are integral to the successability of any transformation, be it governance or corporate. Why not should we have considered before spending all of this money that we run a pilot project with the actual resource or asset, test and adjust to see its adaptability to our domain, recognize where there may be some weaknesses, recognize how we could adjust it or work with it or use this level or go up to another level or whatever, and use the pilot project as the springboard or the launch pad to determine future acquisitions or operationalizations of assets, be it in national security or other ministries. I didn't see that. We probably didn't see that. Maybe we were not privy to see that. Maybe there was a pilot project. And if there was one, now is a good time. Now is a good time to identify that there was one and to also identify what were some of the quick wins, the low-hanging fruit that were achieved by these pilot projects. Pilot projects are integral to the successability of governance and transformation, be it corporate, private, or public sector. Gentlemen.
Is our policing technologically driven adequately, or should I say adequately technologically driven? The policing that takes place in this country?
Yeah. To my knowledge, and in all fairness to our acting commissioner of police, who has been pushing assiduously for the advancement of the utilization of technologically driven policing, I think there is some work to be done. It's a work in progress. And that also has to deal with funding and costing, because technologically driven sounds good. It's a good buzzword. Everybody uses it. The media loves to splash it across their systems. But there's a significant costing to that. And it comes right back to the conversation that we had before about the due diligence, about the spending, and about smart utilization. But I think that there is a lot of work still to be done regarding the adopting of technologically driven policing in the lines of investigation, information gathering, capturing of information, providing coverage, for instance. That's the CCTV system. That's technology. Utilizing all of the analytics and tying that into a national grid, and of course, mobilizing and responses. That is a whole technologically driven aspect. There is a lot of work to be done still in the utilization of technology in our policing, because something that is not being talked about is the science of policing along the lines of investigations and the forensics aspect. That is technology too, be it not only DNA, but tracking weapons, tracing systems, even cyber, even the counterfeit and white collar crime, and some of those issues requires technology. But when we hear technology, we run into the sensationalization of only thinking spyware. No, technology is also addressing investigations and the science of policing, especially in the line of investigations on our crime scenes. That is a whole different ballgame, probably a whole next interview. We are not there yet, gentlemen.
Mr. Heerah, that was like an entire book that you wrote at us there. I mean, that was, I must say, wonderfully expressed. What percentage, clearly the things that you have just outlined, it would mean that we are nowhere close to having all those things in place to enhance our policing. How far off are we in this country from getting to that place? 20% off, 30% off? I think from what you have said, it's something about 75% off. How close are we?
In all fairness, Richard, we've known each other for a number of years. I would be unable, Fareed and team, to give a quantitative demonstration of where we are. And I think it would be nice that if we could hear that from the TTPS, based on following some of the recommendations that we would have made this evening along the lines of, hi guys, why not conduct a review and let's test this. Let's test this quantitatively along the lines of a percentage as to where we are, so we could understand where we are going, more so how we are getting there. Gentlemen, with the greatest of respect, I have come to the end of my time with the interview. I can take one closing remark or make one closing remark, but I must commend you on a good conversation this afternoon, a good discussion for Trinidad and Tobago, and very in-depth indeed. And we were able to toe the line and not cross boundaries with regards to where we can go and where we can't go. But
I've got my hand up for a very quick answer, Mr. Heerah. Based on the method that they use to employ police officers, do you think that should change? As being you should have certain qualifications now to get into the police service because of the technological dispensation now?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. As I said, the environment has changed incrementally, and therefore our approaches. It comes down to a term in law enforcement, guys, called tradecraft. Our tradecraft has to also shift and change because of the new dynamics of crime and the new systems that we are seeing. Because as we sit here and have a law enforcement structured conversation, the criminal elements are doing the same thing, and they are exploring and conducting research, and they are recruiting young, bright people because they've recognized where the corridors and the portals for crime and making money exist. And therefore, to be ahead of the game, we will have to make certain adjustments. I'm hopeful that the commissioner and his strategic team and those who are advising, including national security, is adjusting their tradecraft in the lines of recruitment and selection to treat with the new criminals that are on the ground. A smarter, brighter, technologically driven criminal is the threat that we face. Thank you very much, 2.1. It's been a
Thank you so very much. It's been very,
We want to
very...
thank you for making yourself available.
Yes, I think somebody was saying something.
No, we are just
We
thanking
want to thank you for making
No, I
yourself
said thank you
available.
so much again,
Yes.
Mr. Heerah, and our listeners today are a lot more better off for what you have contributed here today. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, Richard.
And
Thank
we
you
look forward to you coming back on sometime.
Yeah, God bless and stay safe out there, guys.
You too, my brother.
Yeah, same to you. Okay.
That was a real interesting session because basically I had to get that question in, Richard, because
Yes.
in the police service, since I was a little guy, I realized that ascension or promotion in the police service was always based along the lines of service. How long you've been there? They have some guys who are sergeants and inspectors and superintendents who do have at least 5% of the intelligence of the new recruit who has been coming through schools and all different kind of institutions to get into the police service via this new normal, if I should put it that way. Since let's say like 2015 coming up, 2010 coming up, social media exploded and the use of these devices exploded, and it has now become the new normal. You must be into that in some form or fashion. Now, most of the older servants of the police service, if I should put it like that, are guys who they can use their phone. They can use WhatsApp. They can go into email. I mean, that's the low-hanging fruits of the technological advancement these days. Now, the majority of the police service, I personally think, could be, the content, the composition. Are these guys, the young ones who just came in, let's say from 2000, coming up the road, they would have a better appreciation of the use of these new devices, especially crime-fighting devices, and how they go about investigating, as compared to the percentage that would dare, just based on I was here since so and so. You see my badge number, I am a veteran in the business. But they don't have a clue as to what's happening now. But those are the senior officials of the police service. How do we make a construct now where some of them would demand respect and look at a disrespect if a new recruit or a young policeman who is past recruit stage, is now a policeman on the beat, not like a recruit who just came in, has a vast amount of knowledge in the use of these technical devices, especially if it goes to fighting crime. I mean, some of these older guys are not there. Some guys who are there a long time who are very savvy, there are some senior citizens who are very savvy. They'll put in the shade, But what I'm saying, that number is very small to the amount that don't have a clue as how to even use their cell phone to the max, based on the kind of equipment we have now. But they are the seniors passing on details to these young ones. And then these young ones say, well, Sarge, that ain't gonna work, Listen, boy, I'm here longer than you. How does that work in the completion of an exercise
producer,
to reduce crime?
Some of that we'd have to tolerate some more.
Yeah.
But most of those people coming closer to retirement, and the younger ones, no, just being fair, and I mean that respectfully.
Okay. Respectfully, I understand that, Richard. But
they got promoted based on the amount of years in
service and things.
And they're looking to retire at a certain level so that their pension would be higher and the gratuity would be more. They can't fault them for it. So in order for them to achieve it, they had to work on. They can only rely on their experience. If you go into a boxing ring now with a boxer, old boxer, You're not going to get the new type of punches you see the young fellas trying out these days.
Yeah.
He's still going back to the all over the top
Left
and
hook and
uppercut and so
uppercut.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're not coming to deal with what them fellas dealing with, big swing now.
The,
When I
the
look at that
issue we
boxing,
have,
though, it's a very different thing.
Yeah.
You know?
But how do we do we have to tolerate that or cope with that until these guys leave if we have to get a real
No, the
new
good
normal
news is
kind of
every time
policing?
one goes, Daddy Mac, every time one goes,
Yeah.
the one who is succeeding that one
Yeah.
is often more qualified and closer to modern day technology. So it's a matter of time before we
Yeah.
catch up. It may not be that long again, eh? It may not be that long because some of the senior ones today are being forced with their phones and the type of cars they're driving now to learn some of these things by forcing.
I tell you.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're kind of catching up. It's slow, but this gonna work itself out.
Don't you think that
But I agree with you.
okay,
They have to change the type of way they recruit people now.
yes, because I mean,
Yeah.
like Mr. Heerah said, the criminals that they are ahead of the game, you know. They're not playing because they're following up from international circumstances and seeing how easy it is to function here. You know,
Yeah.
up to now, we don't have a real DNA sort of lab. We do forensics. We have to look at this little boy. We have to wait days for an autopsy to say what, you know. And I think we are too slow. And I believe that we must have a change of guard. If these other, you see, these senior policemen who don't have a clue as to what happening with the new criminal world, I think they should be put into administrative work where training and the disciplining. When I say training, I mean disciplining because they can't train no high tech thing now. So put them in areas where it needs to be, discipline. The way you speak to people, the way you wear a uniform, the way you put on this and put. I think they should be, not axed from the system because they would need to reach their retirement to get their retirement benefits. I have no qualm to that. I'm not saying push them out of the system. But what I'm saying is that a new team, like that NOC team, that was very effective. The way Mr. Heerah speaks, why isn't he in charge of the reformation of attacking crime via the medium or the media of policing? I mean, when I say it like that, I don't want to say that he should be police commissioner. You understand? I think a guy like him, and if he had worked and put together the NOC, which means he knows of a lot of expertise that exists within other officers or other qualified people to make the thing effective. We have CC cameras all over the place, and it seems like they don't work. We had a drive-by shooting yesterday or the day before at City Gate, and we just saw it on social media. The car shut up and this and that, and there's no kind of continuity in the follow-up to capturing this person. I mean, we cannot compare with America and those places. The Boston bomber, before he even tried to leave town, they had him under manners. You know what I'm saying is that we need a dynamic force now, or our dynamic team at the top of the police service now, that would not just eliminate the guys who don't know about this new spike of technical criminality, and let's have a team, because I know some of these policemen, sometimes I hear them talking, I think they ain't care about this high-tech thing. They want to serve out their time. Nobody move them. I inspector in charge of this and that. Blah, la, 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 la. But nothing happens. We don't get no kind of result that can make the public feel like, yeah, we're going in the right direction now. People call me and tell me they walk in New York with their gold on their hands and things, and when they come to them, put it in their bag and they hide it. Imagine that. So what I think we need, where the police are concerned, are some technically driven guys at the top now. Let's form a team now that can put into effect all what Mr. Heerah said there. Silently, quietly, like a CIA. This SAS thing, I don't even have faith in that because I don't see anything happening. According to you, 1.6 million spent so long billion, is it? So long it was spent. And to date, the Citygate incident, I can call into fact here now that nothing, they traced nothing. So what was the use of that? Or what is the use of
what would have happened with that Citygate matter? What you would hear if they look into it is none of the cameras were working.
is that is what
And
I'm
if they were
talking
working,
about.
they're not, you could see it if you're watching live, but not
Yeah.
being recorded.
Yeah,
So they can't pull back the footage.
nothing.
You know, I mean, so it's a sad situation. And we spend too much money. And yes, we could be like parts of America. We could be like New York. Look at Oklahoma. Don't forget him. Guy who bombed the Oklahoma bomber.
Yes.
He didn't know how to do the tongue.
Yeah.
You know, he did. He pulled aside and just saying the guys. Pulled aside and saying the guy. Timothy McVeigh. Remember him?
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah.
You know, and it's
And
always
they felt well, no, it had to be him.
yeah.
And they
You
checked him out.
you
And he
always wonder
confessed.
how that happened so quickly. You know,
Yeah,
and in our country.
because of how they are capable, their intelligence and their ability to respond to those things make it very hard for the perpetrator to get away. That's why you find when they catch them and they go into their homes, the perpetrator, they say was planning this for about a year, 2-3 years.
Yes.
Because in planning, they had to plan that long to pull it off because of the way in which those developed countries respond.
Yeah.
In other words, the probability of getting away from doing that is very low. So they had to plan and plan and plan, and then hope when they're implementing the plan, it is I should say, very effective, very meticulous.
Yes.
So that just what the planners that do this, it happen at the time again, you can't this time and take off here. This are the movies, you know.
Yes.
Where you see one man driving and all kind of police car crashing and the star boy, the bad boy driving and nobody can catch him, and then he end up on a lonely road by himself and he's talking and smoking a cigar, you know. He get away. Craziness, them chopper, even the media choppers would help you crash, you know. They're following you all about and sharing the information live. Look at him, he turn here, he's on Boulevard, he go on here, he crash into a roundabout. He's going into a house, it's number so and so and so. And they fly, they go on behind to tell you he's in the house. When they tell you in the house, he in the house, he passed through the window. You're not getting away.
No.
You're not getting away. And the kind of money we're spending here, it's really alarming and disturbing.
Yes. Yes. I agree.
We could have been equal to those developed countries and those developed cities around the world, because our country is smaller than most of those cities. But yet still, we have more money per capita than some of those cities. So why we can't make it work?
That's right.
Why we can't it's not working, not because we lack the political will. The political will, I believe, is there. It's not working because they do not want it to work, and that carries with it potential intention. They deliberately, possibly, don't want it to work because there are those who have to benefit from crime.
Yes.
And if they were to fix it, those who making 4 or 5 billion out from the Ministry of National Security on an annual basis, we do to their business.
Right.
We do to their business. When that system came in for 1.6 billion, who brought it in? Who brought it in? Ferries, who brought it in, you know? Who made the link up?
This is where I'm at, Richard. Here was my position. The last report we had that was docketed in Parliament in relation to the performance of the SSA, the agency, that report was in 2017. We've had no reports from 2017 to now. 2018, 19, 20, that were 5 years. So for 5 years, we've had no official data to refer to that bear fruit or give some sort of indication as to what achievements the SSA as an agency has brought to the table. Where if it is we were to get that official data, you and I wouldn't be speculating today and we'll be putting Mr. Heerah in a position where he has to say that he can't speak about that, or he doesn't want to talk about that, or it will step into information that he ought not to be sharing given his previous position. When I look at the data, and I'm quoting because this is what I have at my disposal, right? The 2017 accomplishments. They said here, according to what I'm reading, I'm looking at page 13 of that report. It says that the SSA's intelligence led to prevention of 29 homicides in 2017. It led to seizure of 275 kilograms of cocaine, seizure of 1.25 pounds of marijuana. No, let me correct myself. No. 51.25, not 1.25. 51.25 pounds of marijuana. Now, you and I know that 51 pounds of marijuana is small weed.
I tell you.
Small weed. Man has been coming before the magistrate court with 10 pounds of marijuana, with 25 pounds of marijuana before the court. You can't tell me that you spend all that money in 2017 and all you see is 51 pounds of marijuana, 275 kilograms of cocaine, and prevent 29 murders. Now I accept the 29 murders you prevent, because the 29 murders you could have prevented could have been people that we know, friends that we have, and even if it's not people that we know and friends that we have, it's 29 lives saved and families unaffected and not affected by a murder that could have been executed. So I could live with that. But I am buying into the statistics of the cocaine seize and the marijuana seize. And all that money spent, and they seized 14 firearms in 2017, 14, 1-4, and 997 rounds of ammunition. Now, I am not ponging them. I'm saying that, I'm not laughing. I'm serious about what I'm reading here. If this is the data you're presenting to us, then does the yield, is it really worth the expense? I am saying it is worth it. It is worth it if it is what we're seeing here is saving lives and saving money. But really and truly, we can't put a price on investment and capital expenditure. But over time, when we look at the totality of what the SSA has achieved, and forget 2017, over the last 5 years, if we had that data, then we could say, well, over the last 5 years, the legislation that exists and the institutions that have been put in place and the people who were empowered to look after our interests. And let me come down to brass tacks and real language. The spying that was taking place was worth it, because the totality of everything over the past 5 years, it speaks in volumes. Are we not seeing that? And we could say that because they're not presenting us with the data. Until there is data to say otherwise, then we're not seeing the achievement, we're not seeing the acquisition and feeling the fruits of it on the ground, which is you and I could be walking Trinidad and Tobago feeling safer. All we're seeing is increase in violence, increase in murder. Present the data, present the information to the parliament, so you and I could now sit down and say, well, listen, we stumped, we can't talk, we can't criticize. We could only praise the legislation and the institutions of the state for the way it has been functioning, because the data is speaking for itself. Without data, we could only presume the worst, because the climate we're living in doesn't speak to one where there's confidence being inspired in us by the work that they profess to be doing.
So correct. Gentlemen, I got to interject here. We've got news at 6, and we will continue on the other side. Just let us do this. It's about 5 minutes. Don't go anywhere.
I see Mr. Hussain, Dr. Hussain has also joined us. So just to let our viewers know, we'll be coming back in immediately after the news, and we'll resume with Dr. Hussain.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen.